Today's lesson is, could 4-day work weeks be coming to Taiwan? Hi, everybody. I'm Roger.
And I'm Helen.
And today we're going to ask a question. Could 4-day work weeks be coming to Taiwan? Of course, everybody nowadays has a 5-day work week. Many years ago, of course, Taiwan had a 5.5-day work week, which was later changed to a 5-day work week. But now people are talking about letting people work for just 4 days. Is that going to happen in Taiwan? Do you think it will, Helen?
I don't know, but I think it depends on what's best for the companies and also the employees. So it's a decision that needs to be made by both sides.
Indeed. And of course, if there's only a 4-day work week, then people will have 3 days off to have fun, and that might actually benefit the tourism industry or restaurants or hotels or whatever. So there might be some advantages to having a 4-day work week, which we'll talk about as our lesson continues. So let's begin our lesson by listening to the first part, and then we'll come back to discuss it.
Could 4-day work weeks be coming to Taiwan? Earlier this year, a proposal was filed in Taiwan to reduce the average of 5 working days per week to only 4. The proposal was sent to the government for review after passing the required threshold for a government response.
大家好，第一部分我们来介绍名词 proposal， 它的意思是提案、提议。例如 Harold made many proposals to his team, but only one was accepted by all. Harold 向他的团队提出了许多提案，但是只有一个被大家接受。又或者说 I have a proposal for the next book to read in our book club. 我对我们读书会下次要看的书有个提议。另外，补充这个字的动词 propose, P-R-O-P-O-S-E, propose, 它有提出、提议的意思。例如 They proposed several solutions to the problem. 他们提出几个解决这个问题的方案。或者 Ken proposed a few methods to increase sales in the meeting. Ken 在会议上提出了一些增加销售额的方法。再来，我们看到单字 threshold， 它是名词，指的是门槛、界限。例如 The boy sits on the threshold waiting for his parents to take him home. 那个男孩坐在门槛上，等待他的父母来接他回家。或是Advanced technology pushes the threshold of the impossible further away. 日新月异的科技将不可能的界限推得更远。
So earlier this year, a proposal was filed in Taiwan to reduce the average of 5 working days per week to only 4. So this is something that happened earlier this year in 2023. A proposal was filed. So a proposal is a suggestion or a plan for how something should be done. And when it's filed, it means that it was officially put forth for consideration by officials. And this proposal was to allow people to work only 4 days a week instead of the average 5 working days that employees have to work currently.
Right, so of course a proposal is just some kind of idea that someone suggests, usually officially to a government or something like that. For example, many years ago when they were going to build the MRT in Taipei, they probably had lots of proposals from different people as to how this network of trains and stuff would be set up. They made lots of proposals and eventually they accepted one, and now we have the MRT that we love so much these days. And yes, indeed, we've got a proposal filed in Taiwan, and that proposal involves reducing the average of 5 working days per week to only 4. So somebody thought this was a good idea, and they made a proposal to the government. And of course, if you want to make this proposal to the government, you will file this proposal. Just like if you want to sue somebody in court because they did something mean to you, you can file a lawsuit with the government or with the court or whatever. And of course, this proposal involves reducing the 5-day work week to a 4-day work week.
So the proposal was sent to the government for review after passing the required threshold for a government response. This proposal was filed and it was sent to the government. So that's how it was filed. It was presented to the government and the government had to review it. So the government or members of the government reviewed the proposal. They read it and they considered it. After this proposal passed the required threshold for a government response. So a threshold is something like a limit. It's something that keeps certain things out and allows other things in. So the government probably receives a lot of proposals from citizens, and some of them they don't even consider. Perhaps these proposals have not received enough support, enough signatures, or people saying this is what we want. So one threshold may be, let's say, this proposal needs 10,000 signatures before the government will even consider it or read it. And those 10,000 signatures would be considered a threshold.
Exactly. Again, as you said, Helen, it's a limit. It's a line that someone can cross. And so in this particular case, they required a certain amount of support from people for the government to respond to this proposal. And it did pass that required threshold, so the government needed to act on that proposal. Okay, that brings us to the end of the first part of our lesson. Let's listen now to the second part.
While working fewer days might sound appealing, not everyone is on board with the idea. Some export companies and manufacturers, for example, are worried that it might increase labor costs, as they would either have to pay workers overtime or hire new staff to cover empty shifts. In the UK, however, 92% of 61 companies that participated in a 4-day workweek trial last year decided to keep the shorter week even after the trial ended. The trial followed the 180-100 rule, meaning that employees were paid 100% of their salary for working only 80% of their usual work time while maintaining 100% of their usual productivity.
第二部分我们看到片语 on board 指的是支持、赞成某想法、计划等，加入某行列、阵营等。例如 Unfortunately, not all members of the community are on board with the project. 遗憾的是，不是所有社区成员都赞成这项计划。又或者说 Several prominent actors are on board for the film project. 几位知名的演员加入该片演出的行列。接下来我们看到 shift 这个名词的意思是轮班、轮班时间。例如 Leslie works the night shift at the convenience store.Leslie 在便利商店上夜班。又或者说 Jim likes working the late shift at the restaurant because it is usually quieter. Jim 喜欢在餐厅轮晚班，因为那时通常比较安静。另外，这个字也可以当作动词使用，意思是改变、转移。例如 Martha shifted to an all-vegetarian diet this year. Martha 今年改变成全素的饮食习惯。再举一个例子 Many voters shifted to support the young candidate. 许多选民转而支持那位年轻的候选人。
So we know that the proposal was accepted by the government and the government has to respond to it. But what about this proposal? Is it a good idea or not? Well, while working fewer days might sound appealing, not everyone is on board with the idea. So initially we might think, wow, working 4 days instead of 5, wouldn't everyone love that? Isn't that a good idea? However, not everyone is on board with the idea. When you're on board with something, it means that you agree with it. You want it to pass through. For instance, I could come up with an idea and present it to a group of people, and then I can ask everyone, is everyone on board with my idea, or does anyone have any objections?
Right. So remember, on board means you're on a ship. And remember, if you go onto a ship or a bus, you get on the bus, you get on the boat. But if you're getting into a car or a taxi, you get in the car, you get in the taxi, you get on a plane, on a boat, because you're standing when you go onto that thing. The phrase is to be on board with something, which means you agree with this, you support it. Now, some export companies and manufacturers, for example, are worried that it might increase labor costs, as they would either have to pay workers overtime or hire new staff to cover empty shifts. So again, we're talking about the fact that not everyone agrees with this idea. We've got some export companies who specialize in sending products overseas from Taiwan, and we've got manufacturers. Manufacturers, of course, are companies that actually produce things like wafer chips or any kind of product. It could be food items, it could be furniture, you name it. We need somebody to manufacture those things. And of course, we've got lots of manufacturers here in Taiwan. And they're worried about this proposal because they think it might increase labor costs. Labor just has to do with work and the people you hire to do these jobs.
Right. So these manufacturers, companies are worried that if the number of working days per week is reduced to 4, then they're going to have to end up paying more money for labor costs. So as Roger mentioned, labor is a word that refers to workers, or more specifically, people who work with their hands. Another term might be blue-collar workers, although that term isn't really used as much these days, as opposed to people who work in offices who don't really work with their hands. So we associate perhaps labor with people who work in factories. And these manufacturers and companies are afraid that the cost of labor or the cost of workers will go up because if people started working 4 instead of 5 days per week, then they will have to pay workers overtime. So if these workers were needed to work an extra day, a 5th day, then that 5th day would be considered overtime time that is over the regular amount of time that they work. Or if they didn't want to pay overtime, or if these workers, laborers, didn't want to work overtime, then the companies would have to hire new staff or other workers to cover empty shifts. So laborers usually work in shifts. A shift is a period of time that you typically work. This could be in a factory, a store, or a restaurant.
Right, and of course there are different periods of time for those different shifts. You might work the day shift, the swing shift, or the graveyard shift. When I worked at a motel in the United States, I worked the graveyard shift, which was from 11 p.m. until 7 in the morning. And in this particular case, they would have to pay workers overtime or hire new staff to cover empty shifts. And in the UK, however, 92% of 61 companies that participated in a 4-day workweek trial last year decided to keep the shorter week even after the trial ended. So they had this experiment. It was a trial work week in which 61 companies participated, and they tried out this 4-day work week. It was a trial. They were just trying it out. They weren't exactly adopting this policy, at least not yet. And they thought it was a really good policy. It worked really well for them. So quite a few of those companies, 92% of them, decided to keep this shorter week even after the trial ended. They thought it was very beneficial for everybody.
Yes, the trial followed the 100-80-100 rule, meaning that employees were paid 100% of their salary for working only 80% of their usual work time while maintaining 100% of their usual productivity. So there is a ratio here, 100-80-100, and it's a comparison of the amount of time that the employees had to work and the amount of money that they made for the amount of time that they worked and how productive they were, the amount of work that they were able to get done within 80% of their usual working time. So this ratio or this comparison had to do with determining whether these employees were able to maintain their productivity. Now, productivity refers to the rate at which goods are produced or services are rendered, especially when these goods are produced or services rendered in relation to time, money, and the amount of energy put into producing them.
It's interesting. They need to produce the same amount of things as they did before, but they're only working 80% of the time. How is that possible? There may be various reasons for that, which we won't get into here. But in any case, the fact is that lots of these companies in the UK decided to keep the 4-day work week week for some reason. They thought it was beneficial for the company and for the employees. Okay, that brings us to the end of the second part of our lesson for today. Let's move on now to the third part, and we'll wrap things up for today.
Meanwhile, productivity exceeded expectations in trials in Spain, the US, and New Zealand, even as employees' physical and emotional well-being improved. So could a 4-day workweek work in Taiwan? Only time will tell if the recent proposal leads to trials here that answer this question.
最后第三部分来介绍动词 exceed， 这个字的意思是超过、超出、超越。例如 Jerry's luggage exceeded the weight allowance for the flight. Jerry 的行李超过航班允许的重量额度。或是 Eddie's grades at school exceeded his parents' expectations. Eddie 的学业成绩超出他父母的预期。
Meanwhile, productivity exceeded expectations in trials in Spain, the US, and New Zealand, even as employees' physical and emotional well-being improved. So we saw that a trial was conducted in the UK, but in other countries, this particular trial was conducted as well in Spain, the United States, and New Zealand, and the findings were very similar. So the employees' physical and emotional well-being improved, which basically meant that the employees were much better off with 4-day work week. They were better off physically. They had physical well-being. So physical here means related to the body as opposed to the mind. And well-being is a word that refers to the general physical and mental state of someone when they are healthy, happy, and safe.
Right, so productivity exceeded expectations. It went beyond those expectations when they conducted trials in Spain, the US, and New Zealand. And yes, indeed, the employees were pretty happy there. Their physical well-being improved and also their emotional well-being improved, maybe because they now have 3-day weekends and they're better relaxed when they return to work on Monday, and therefore they're probably more willing to work hard for the company instead of slacking off all the time. Now, moving on to the next sentence, it says, so could a 4-day work week work in Taiwan? That's a good question. What do you think? Do you think a 4-day work week would be suitable or applicable to Taiwan? Well, only time will tell. So if you say this, only time will tell, you're just saying that nobody really knows the answer to any questions about the future. We just have to wait and see. Only time will tell if the proposal leads to trials here that will answer this question. So yes, indeed, we're going to have to discuss this, and the government will have to debate this in the legislature to find out whether this policy is actually useful for Taiwan and if the people in Taiwan actually want to have a 4-day work week.
Yes, that's a good question because not everyone may want to have a 4-day work week, although I do personally know a lot of people who would prefer a 4-day work week because they say that it would benefit their physical well-being as well as their emotional well-being.
Exactly. And of course, you would eliminate the hassle of going to work and coming home from work from one day. So you'd only have to go to and from work 4 days a week instead of 5, and that would be less stressful. And of course, you would definitely look forward to the weekend. Maybe they would let everybody have Friday off, or maybe they would let people have Monday off. But in any case, they would have a 4-day work week. And of course, all of you can discuss this amongst yourselves because it is kind of an interesting idea. I don't think we're quite ready for a 3-day work week, but I think we better try with a 4-day work week first of all. Well, that brings us to the end of our discussion for today. It's now time to turn things over to Hanny.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第3部分有提到，在西班牙、美国和纽西兰的试验中，生产力超过了预期，甚至员工的身心健康都获得改善。那么文中它用到 exceed 这个动词来表达超过、超出的意思。那我们来学习它的字首字根。好，看到 CEED 或是 CESS 或是 CEDE 这一类的字根呢，有 go 的意思，也就是前进啊，行走。那它也有退让、投降或是放弃的意思。我们看到在 exceed 这个字当中，它的字首 EX表示由内向外，那么 CEED 这个字根表示行进。那我们就可以试着联想啦，由内而外走出去，向外发展，那就会胜过留在原地的人，超越那些人。所以 exceed 就是联想说它有超过啊、胜过或是凌驾的意思。好，那我们顺便补充几个有这一类字根的单字。第一个是先来看看带有 CEED 这个字根的例子，像 proceed。Proceed， 那它的字首 Pro 表示 forward 向前， CEED 表示 go， 那么合在一起 proceed 就是 go forward， 也就是朝着什么前进的那种意思嘛。那它也有继续做某事啊，继续进行的意思。好，那第二个我们来看看带有 CESS 这个字根的例子，像 necessary， 它的字首 NE 表示否定，字根 CESS 表示放弃，ARY 是形容词字尾，那不得放弃的东西就表示它是必要的、必须的咯。再来第三个，我们看带有 CEDE 这个字根的例子，像 recede RECEDE， 那它的字首 RE 表示 back 向后，字根 CEDE 表示 go 行进行走，那么合在一起 recede 就有后退、渐渐远去的意思。那我们这边可以补充一个用法叫 receding hairline， 这是表达逐渐向后移的发际线，那就表示逐渐秃顶，头顶前面这个部分头发渐渐秃了。好，那我们接着看到课文最后一句啊，他写说只有时间能证明最近的这项提案是否会导向在这里的试验。好，来回答这个问题。文中他用到 Only time will tell if 来表达说只有时间能证明是否怎么样怎么样。那么 only time will tell 或者是 time will tell 就是表达只有时间能证明，用来表达说事情发展要经过一段时间才会知道结果。这个说法呢可以单独使用，也可以接名词子句，像是接 if 或是 whether 引导的名词子句。举例来说， Only time will tell if we've made the right decision， 只有时间能证明我们是否做出正确的决定。好，以上是今天重点整理，我们回顾今天的单字吧。
Proposal. After working on it for several days, Jane presented her project proposal to her professor. Manufacturer. Our class visited a computer manufacturer today to see how their products are made. Labor. The workers filed a legal case arguing that they had not been paid fairly for their labor. Shift. Connie's shift at the hospital starts at 7 p.m. and ends at 7 a.m. Productivity. Setting clear goals can lead to improved productivity. Exceed. Tom's talent exceeded that of any other actor in the play. Physical. Mrs. Cohen's physical examination indicated that she is in good health.
Discussion starter starts now!
Here's our discussion starter for our lesson today, and the question is, as a student, would you rather go to school just 4 times a week instead of 5? Why or why not?
Yes, given that we are given a lot of material to learn in school and we have to focus on learning new material when we are in class, I'd rather go to school just 4 times per week because then I would have the extra day to stay home and study and review my lessons, because I think that sometimes the pace of teaching goes a little bit too fast and I don't have enough time to catch up. So if I had Friday and Saturday to study and to review my notes, then I think I would be better at learning new material.
Well, I'm not a student, but if I were a student, I would answer this question with, no. I do not want to have a 4-day school week. I'd rather have a 5-day school week. And I would rather go to school 5 days per week because, gee, I couldn't go without seeing my classmates. I look forward to that every day of going in to see my classmates and doing things with them and studying in the classroom and participating in school clubs and playing sports with my classmates. I would rather not have 3 days with my parents and my family, although they're lovely people. I love my family and stuff like that, but still, it's more fun to be with my classmates.
Well, everyone, today's article has come to an end, and I sure hope you enjoy reading along with us. I am Helen.
I am Roger.
See you next time.